Whenever ready, should we start?
All right.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. This week's Parshat is Parshat Vayeshev. Rabbi Sana just mentioned something about Rabbi Feinstein, about his shir, so I think maybe I'll start with something from Rabbi Feinstein. In Perek Lamed Zayin, the beginning of the Parsha, it says, Yisrael ohav es Yosef mikol bonav ki ben zekunim v'lo v'osok sonas pasim. That Yaakov loved Yosef the most of his children. Why? Ki ben zekunim v'lo. What does that mean? He loved him because he was ben zekunim. So one shot is, as you know, that Yosef was his youngest child for a little while until he had Binyamin. He was like his little baby boy that he had as an older man. And when a person is an older person, and this is the youngest child, so it's common that a person would go ahead and show a little bit, you spoiled the little baby. Everyone spoils the little baby, that's in the house, so to speak. So that's now a little bit of what he loved Yosef. That's what the pasuk is. Rashi says, he was born to him when he was an older man. And also looked sonas pasim. And he bought him a special coat and so on and so forth. And Yaakov, and really that's what Yaakov was thinking. Yaakov was thinking he doesn't have to worry that the brothers are going to be jealous of Yosef, because everyone knows the baby gets a little extra attention, a little extra toys, extra stuff, or extra something, so to speak, or whatever. The baby, the youngest one, therefore, since that's the youngest one, so you have a little extra for him. But Rabbi Feinstein said the problem is that what preceded that, before Yaakov gave him the Sonas Pasim, is Vayovi Yosef es libosam roa lavia. Yosef brought the bad words, spoke bad about the brothers to the father. So really, the brothers would have been able to accept this Sonas Pasim that Yaakov gave to Yosef. But the reason why they weren't able to accept it is because they looked at Yosef, that Yosef is trying to do something against them. Yosef is trying to make them look bad in the eyes of their father. So if Yosef is trying to make them look bad in the eyes of the father, so therefore now in their eyes it looks like Yosef is being successful. They don't look at the Sonas Pasim that Yaakov's giving him as, so to speak, because he's a ben zekunim. They look at it a little bit, there's a certain amount of favoritism, and because Yosef is giving them the bad reputation. So that's the story. And therefore the Gemara says, a person should never give favoritism to one child over another child. So Rabbi Feinstein, I heard he says every Friday at 11 o'clock he comes to the yeshiva, MTJ, it's right, you can hear it. So he says that, what's the la'olam in the Gemara? And I think you could use it in many places in Shas, you'll see the la'olam, and each time you have to ask yourself, what's the la'olam? You see, la'olam is, even when you think there's a good reason to give favoritism. And maybe people won't take it bad, but la'olam ayishan adam. Even in those circumstances, don't give the favoritism, because you don't know how some of the other children will take it. So that's what he wanted to say. Now this Sonas Pasim, I remember once seeing a kliyaka, a beautiful idea that he suggests. This Sonas Pasim Yaakov gave to Yosef. Did Yosef wear it on top? Or did he wear it on the bottom? Did he hide it? He wore it. So if you look, there's a beautiful diuk he has. When they went ahead and they captured Yosef, and they kidnapped him, says Vayavshitu es Yosef. They got him undressed. What did they took off? Es kutonto, es kesonas apasim asher alav. So the kliyaka suggests when you take off first you take off your jacket. If you take off your jacket, you take off your shirt. So if we're going to learn pshat in the pasuk, kutonto es kesonas apasim as referring to two different things. Kutonto being his shirt, or his shirt that he wears on top, and his Ksonas Pasim is two different things. So the Sifsei Chum learns in Rashi, it's all referring to the Ksonas Pasim. That's what Sifsei Chum learns in Rashi. But it's not clear if it's referring to there are two different garments that are going on in this pasuk or one garment. So if the way Kliyakas, if they took off Kutonto and the Ksonas Pasim, so Kutonto would be the shirt that he. Now, what do you take off first? obviously, if you say he took off this and then that, so the first thing that came off was the kutonto, his shirt, and then the second thing that came off was the ksonis pasim. So the pasim was the second thing that came off, so where was the ksonis pasim? Underneath. Yosef was hiding, he wasn't showing off the ksonis pasim. But, however, even though he wasn't showing off the ksonis pasim, I wanted to say, according to that pshat, so why does the pasuk say that he took off his kutonto? It should have said this ksonis pasim and the ksonis pasim, right? So the Sifra Chachamim, Pshat and Rashi would fit in. It's all one. It says es kutonto, which kutonto? The ksonis pasim. But according to this pshat, it should say es kutonto. If it's two different garments, say es kutonto this ksonis pasim, right? And so I want to say like this. The pshat is like this. When the brothers saw Yosef, he was wearing two different garments. They saw kutonto. When they saw the outside garment, they didn't see that. They saw right through. They saw the ksonis pasim. It's not that they saw that you're wearing a shirt and you're wearing tzitzis. No, I see the tzitzis. I don't see your shirt. That's the idea. Yosef, when they saw Yosef, they didn't see there was a cover on top of his ksonis pasim. They saw right through, and that was the problem. If they would not have seen right through, were able to forget about it and not focus on it, then they were able to handle it. And then when we find these dreams, I mean, obviously, what's Yosef telling them these dreams, and they got upset at him? So obviously, I would just suggest, I presume this is the pshat, that the reason why Yosef tells them the dreams is because Yosef wants to show them dreams. Heaven is involved in dreams. Shemayim is involved in dreams. When Hashem sends certain messages through dreams, right? It goes after the interpretation, but a dream there are messages. So Yosef is saying, you know what? We have a disagreement. Am I right? I think you guys are doing something wrong in life. I think you're on a bad derech. You guys think you're doing right. Right? So we have a dispute. And Yosef is saying, you know what? The heaven is showing me. There's a basko. Whatever. The heaven is giving a message that I'm right. Look what it says. You guys, your sheaves are going to bow down to my sheaf. And then they can say to themselves, listen, Yosef is, maybe you know why Yosef has such a dream? Sometimes it says that sometimes you dream at night what you think about by day. So then Yosef says, I got another dream. You know what? I have a dream. That the Shemesh and the Yereach, the sun and the moon are bowing down. And 11 stars. Who's the sun and the moon? Sun and the moon is my father and my mother. Does anybody in the right mind ever think by day that his father and mother is going to bow down to them? No one would ever dream of that. And I'm dreaming that. Said it's not because I'm thinking that in the daytime. So what does it have to be? It's because God is Hashem is sending a message. But they did not take the message. They did not accept the message that really Hashem was giving a message. Hashem was sending a message. And really, if they would have taken the message and said, "Hey, you know what? I think our brother, Hashem is telling us our brother's right, and maybe we're making a mistake. So let's analyze ourselves." But they did not do it. They did not accept the message that way. Maybe that's also a very big lesson. You know, my friend has this eifa called Chumash, listen to your messages or something like that. Or listen to something like that. So there's a lot of messages that Hashem is sending, but that was a little problem that the brothers did not actually take note of the message. It says, we're going to skip around a little bit in the Parshat. Perek Lametes Pasuk Vav. You know, when the Eshes Potiphar asked Yosef to be with her, to live with her, the pasuk says he refused to live with her and lishkaves and lios imo, to be with her. So the Rashbam points out, he says, I don't want to be with you, even yichud. Yosef was careful, lios imo, not to be with her even with yichud. So this is something that Yosef, I mean, these are all, when we learn Sefer Vayeshev, we have to realize there's so many mitzvahs and lessons that teaching for us how we have to act in our life. How did Yosef was a living Torah? People have to be careful from all these things. And here he was careful to be lios ima, lios yichud. And even though yichud with a goy was a gzeira that came later on, you know, yichud with a married lady, according to Sefer Chinuch, according to the Rambam, yichud with many Rishonim, yichud with a married lady or the arayis would be asa deraisa. But there were certain yichuds are derabanan. Yichud with a single girl is derabanan if she's not a nida. Yichud with a goy is derabanan. But Yosef was careful even with Yichud, not to be careful out of Yichud. It's interesting to note that the Sefer Chinuch says a biblical source for Yichud is from the pasuk of L'Sukruvu L'Galos Erva. Torah says, and the way the Rambam understands, let's say we go with the Rambam Shita, the Rambam understands L'Sukruvu L'Galos Erva is that we're not allowed to do things that will lead to revealing the Erva, and therefore included in that, he says, Mina Yesod Hazeh, included in that would be Yichud. Because Yichud will come to person along with the lady, and no one's going to come in. There's always a concern that it might come to leading the Galos Erva. So therefore, that will be under that heading. But also it's interesting to note that the pasuk says, I think it's a very nice diuk. It says when Yosef came to the house of Potiphar, it says he was bought by Potiphar, Sarah Tabochim, Ish Mitzri, an Egyptian from the Ishmaelim. So again, we identified his master as a what? As an Egyptian. And then it says Yosef, Hashem was with Yosef, he was Ish Matzliach, he was very successful. And then the pasuk says, Vayihi bebeis Adonav HaMitzri. He was in the house of his master, the what? The Mitzri. Didn't you already identify that his master was a Mitzri? So you could just say, Vayihi bebeis Adonav. He was house of his master, and Vayara Adonav ki Hashem ito. Good question. Eitan, you like the question?
Yeah.
What does it say, Vayihi bebeis Adonav? HaMitzri, you know, we already identified. You need 2 times to tell me that his master was a Mitzri? But we forgot from 2 psukim before? So I wanted to say this idea. Yosef, as you know, was teaching us how do we live in Golos. How do we live when we're under foreign control? How do we live when we're working for Goyim, for Gentiles? How do we live? How do we make it in this society? Right? It's difficult, right? It's not so easy. Vayhi bebeis Adonav HaMitzri. He always remembered that's a Mitzri, and I'm a Jew. Never to forget that. Always Vayhi bebeis Adonav. This is not my house. This is not my home. This is an Egyptian home. Hamavta mekol shechol ben ol choshech ben Yisrael la'amim. Every Motzei Shabbos. After Shabbos, we're about to go back into the world of commerce, or the world of, whatever it is, where we're going to be more intermingling with the world, with the Gentiles of the world. We have to remember, Hamavdu ben kol shechol ben ol choshech. You have to realize ben Yisrael la'amim. You have to realize there has to be a certain step. There's a separation between us. We're different. We're not just one melting pot, so to speak. And that's what Yosef, I would like to suggest, Yosef was teaching us this. Vayhi bebeis Adonav HaMitzri. You always have to remember where you are, and never to forget where your real house is, and who your master is. And that, yes, he's not you. If he's not you, you have to realize that therefore the way of life, and that his culture and his way of life is not your way of life. You have to remember that. So that's maybe a possible answer why the Torah emphasizes Vayhi bebeis Adonav HaMitzri. As you all know, when a person's on guard, then you can be. When you know what you're up against, if you could recognize what you're up against, then you can be successful. But when you don't know what you're up against, when you talk yourself, person talks himself into something that there's nothing out there that he has to be concerned for, then they just become part of the melting pot. In Perek Lametes Pasuk Zayin, talking about this, it says, "Vayi acha advarim ha'ela." After Yosef did not want to be with her, did not want to have yichud with her, and the pasuk says, I'm sorry, right beforehand, it says, "Vayi acha advarim ha'ela." It says the wife of Potiphar lifted up her eyes to Yosef, and she says, "I want you to be with me," and so on, and he refused, and so on and so forth. So the Radak, one of the Rishonim, points out that this story teaches us a great lesson. A lot of times in life, people are faced with difficult challenges, whether they lost their job or whatever it might be. Sometimes when a person does everything that you could do, and then there are certain things that are beyond your control, and things happen. You tried hard at the job, and you got laid off, so to speak. A person has to realize that the end will be good. Shesof l'tova. Everything will work out at the end. He has to have that bitachon. Look at the story of Yosef. Look at the story of Yosef. Here we have this lady making an accusation against him. She makes a whole double about him, right? what does she say about him? She says that he lived with me, so to speak. She tells her master that he wants to, and as a result of that, he goes to jail. But that's true. It's a terrible thing. But at the end of the day, what happened as a result of him going to jail? This really was started the Yeshua. He goes to jail, and in jail, what happens? If you'll be the Monday morning quarterback, and you'll say, what was the key to helping Yosef becoming the second in command of Mitzrayim? Is because he went to jail, and he was there at that place where those guys had the dream. That's what helped that he should become the second in command. So really, even though on the surface it looks like a terrible thing, and we should never ever have to have terrible things happen to us or difficult situations happen to us, and then at the end it turns out for good. We always wanted that it should be like Rabbi Feinstein once said. We say Shana Tova Masuka. It should be sweet. That means Shana Tova, it's going to be good. It's always for the best. Masuka, we should feel the sweetness. It shouldn't just be that it's a good year because it's good. Because everything Hashem does to us is for our benefit. It should be also that we should be able to feel the sweetness. So that was the story with Yosef of looking at the story of Yosef and get chizuk. Everyone should get chizuk from the story of Yosef to say that when there are difficulties in life, and we hope no one ever has them, we should realize as long as you did everything you should do, it's always for the best, as we see at the end happen by Yosef. Interesting. There's a very interesting about Barbanel. I wonder how most people learned when they were growing up. Who did the sin? Who did you by the butler and the baker? And the pasuk said that the butler and the baker sinned to the king of Egypt. What was the sin that they did? Right, Rashi brings down the Chazal. Pebble was found there, a little rock in the bread, fly in the wine. And then the pasuk says, "Vayiksa." Who did Paro get angry at? He got angry al sar hamashkin al sar ofen. So Barbanel says it wasn't the same person who committed the crime that Paro got angry at. Paro got angry on the guy who's in charge, on the head of the sar hamashkin, the head of all the butlers, the head of the bakers. The baker and if the baker and the butler wasn't doing their job, they weren't careful. He didn't help them. He wasn't to them that he held accountable. Your supervisor, your manager, your leader, the Sarah Mashkin and the Sarah Ofen. That's how the Barbanel learns Pshat in that's who Vayiksav Paro al the Sheish was referring to the Sarah Mashkin and Sarah Ofen. Obviously we have to know that when someone is under our supervision, people have parents, they have children that are under supervision, so on and so forth. A lot of times if the child doesn't do something right, then a lot of times the parents are held accountable because you didn't train them properly. Now sometimes you do everything you can do, but sometimes you didn't train them properly. Because if you the head butler would have made sure that your guys working underneath you, your waiters that are working underneath you would understand that if there would be a fly in here, it's the worst thing in the world. They would be extra careful, and they would make sure to check it extra before they give it to the king, so to speak. Obviously, there was something wrong in the discipline, and therefore he held them accountable. So therefore, obviously, we have to look at any time we have people that are under our jurisdiction. We have to realize that we have a great responsibility, and therefore, a lot of times we say that the leaders of the generation are held to a very, if the people of the generation aren't doing the right things, and the question is, did the leaders have to ask themselves, did they do everything they can do to make sure that the people should do what's appropriate to be done? The pasuk says, Perek Lamed Zayin, pasuk Lamed Hey, after they told Yaakov the story, right? They told Yaakov the story that and they made believe that Yosef got killed by a chayra. And the pasuk says, Yaakov tore his garment. Yaakov tore his garment, and he was in mourning. Everyone tried to comfort him. He refused to be comforted. And then the pasuk says, and the Medonim sold him to Mitzrayim, to Potiphar. And then it talks about the story about Yehuda going down. We said already that he was sold to Mitzrayim. What is this pasuk doing here? The last pasuk of Perek Lamed Zayin doing here, that he was sold to Mitzrayim to Potiphar. We already said beforehand that he was sent down to Mitzrayim, And you're not even starting the story of Potiphar now. You hear the question? Now you're going to go to the story of Reuven. What is it doing here? It's a beautiful question. And so the Sra Hamor, I told you about him. He was a Spanish scholar, lived in 1492, Spain, and he got thrown out with the Jews. And he went to Portugal. They got thrown out there also, and he wrote from memory. And he brings out a beautiful point. You see the question? I don't know if what's the connection between? What is this pasuk doing here? And it says beautifully that it says Yaakov cried, and then the pasuk says they sold him to Mitzrayim to Potiphar. The tears of Yaakov and crying for his son did not go empty. The tears of Yaakov that Yaakov cried helped, that Hashem helped, that who's going to be the buyer of Yosef? That now we're going to get Potiphar to buy him. And through Potiphar will start the Yeshua of Yosef. Not the Ishmaelim or the Midanim or whatever other people were who had him. It's going to start. Why it's going to start to roll? It's going to start to roll because of the tears of Yaakov. Vayeshev also aviv v'medonim machroso. That's the connection, Mr. Ramos says. The crying of the father, the crying of Yaakov, the tears that never go in vain. You should know in Halacha it says, if you ever go to a funeral of an Adam Kosher, a proper person, it says you should cry. The tears that a person sheds at a funeral for an Adam Kosher, it says Hashem takes those tears and He puts it b'nei beis ganazav or whatever, and so on and so forth. It's very powerful tears and very strong, and it's very appropriate. It's a time to cry. That would be a proper time to cry. In contrast, however, everyone has to be careful. If you ever make someone else cry, that's very terrible. The power of a tear that someone else sheds because of you is a very bad thing for you. You know, the Gemara says in Vav Mitzia and Perek Hazav, a husband has to be very careful about how he deals with his wife, because if he hurts her feelings and if he's not verbally or so on and so forth, and she cries, it's very dangerous for him. Be careful. Oh no, the tears of wife. Tell your wife, whatever I do to you, don't ever cry. Okay, obviously you should only do good things to her. She never have the reason to cry. But sometimes there's miscommunication. Sometimes people, especially women, are a little bit more sensitive than men. So therefore you have to be extra careful. And also we find the concept also by an almana, a widow, an orphan, so on and so forth. You have to be extra careful. You have to have kid gloves with everybody today. Everyone's very sensitive. But especially with a widow and especially with an orphan, you have this extra sensitivity a person must have. And we'll just end with the Balaturim, but it's not a gematria. Perek Lamed Zayin, Pasuk Lamed Beis, it says, they sent the Kesonas Apasim, they brought it, they said, we found this Kesonas Pasim, this is what the brothers sent, and they said, how can no Kesonas ben Chayim lo? Please recognize, is this the Kesonas of your son or not? So Chazal say it was Yehuda who was really behind this sending of the Kesonas Pasim of Yosef to Yaakov, and as a result of that, it says, Balaturim says, that language that Yehuda, because the Balaturim says there are two times in Tanakh that you have this language of this Hakanah. You have the story of Hakanah right here. You have the story of Baitama, Hakanah. She says, right? She said the same language. So the Balaturim brings down the idea of the same language that he tricked his father. That's the same language he was punished from. And that's the Yonasan ben Azil also says. The idea of Midah keneged Midah. The way Hashem works is Midah keneged Midah. And because of he did this to his father, and it caused pain to his father, and therefore Yehuda was also pained by when he had to go ahead when she said recognize who this is, who's Ksonis and Silmela. The idea obviously is that Hasor Tom Polo, Hashem obviously, the way Hashem works is Midah Keneged Midah. And obviously, if this is for the Ra, we find for the Ra, if Hashem punishes Midah Keneged Midah, we know definitely Chazal also, the Tova, it's the same thing. The way you do a mitzvah, how you do it, and how much you do a mitzvah, that's how much Midah Keneged Midah, that's how much you you'll get back and much more. But Hashem, we should be zochet to always do the right things, and the way you say things. You see, the way she said he did something, hakena. So there was a hakena in the future, and a punishment. If we talk a certain way, there'll be a reward, and also a similar language to us. I wish everyone a very good Shabbos.
Shabbos.